Hello everyone, welcome to the Cinema Analysis channel. I am Juzo. This channel will explore the hidden truths of films that are not usually revealed. Today, I want to talk about Into the Wild. The actions of the protagonist in this film are full of contradictions. I want to talk about this. If you haven't seen the film, I suggest you watch the film first before watching this video. So let's get started. So, did you see the film? One of the most amazing things about this film is that it shows the beauty of nature in the United States. The cinematographer of the film is Eric Gautier from France. The world is seen through the eyes of the protagonist, who is alienated from American society. He is a foreigner in a sense. The reason why the atmosphere of the world is well captured may have something to do with the fact that the cinematographer was a foreigner. This film is based on a true story. On the 6th of September 1992, the body of a young man was found in an abandoned bus on the Stampede Trail in Alaska. The man's name was Chris McCandless, 24 years old. Why did he die alone in the wilderness? John Krakauer, an American writer and mountaineer, investigated and wrote the book. The protagonist, Chris McCandless, who graduated with honors from Emory University, is a so-called elite. He could also study law at Harvard University. He is definitely one of the winners in the capitalist society. At the beginning of the film, his parents say they are going to give him a new car, but he refuses, saying, "I don't want anything. Things. This actually happened. Here is what he wrote in a letter to his sister Karina. "I'm going to have to be real careful not to accept any gifts from them in the future, because they will think they have bought my respect." The authors of the favorite books of a man like him are Tolstoy, Jack London, and Thoreau. These books are stacked in the frame of the shot. War and Peace, The Death of Ivan Illich, The Call of the Wild, White Fang, Warden, Family Happiness. All of them are thought to be read by Chris McCandless. The titles of these books symbolize this story. Chris donated all his savings to Oxfam and destroyed identification such as credit cards. You are required to give all your possessions to the religious order when you renounce this world and join our religion. The reason you have to lose all your possessions is to be free of the attachment to your desire. It is never the economic reason of the religious order, hopefully. So for Chris, giving away all his savings means renouncing this world. A man who renounces throws away his name in the world in which he now lives. Chris McCandless also changed his name to Alexander Supertramp. He threw away a life as an elite and became a tramp. Tolstoy's War and Peace is the story of an aristocrat becoming a peasant. Driving, Chris says, it is associated in our minds with escape from history and oppression and law and irksome obligations, absolute freedom. The author of Warden that Chris likes to read is Thoreau. He is a person who is skeptical of capitalism or civilized society and the way of working there. His self-sufficient way of living is described in the book. Why did Thoreau leave the civilized society? He describes it as follows. There are so many king and subtle masters that enslave both North and South. It is hard to have a southern overseer. It is worse to have a northern one, but worst of all when you are the slave driver of yourself. This expression by Thoreau still has meaning in this 21st century. Most of us who have been brainwashed are slaves, manipulated to work for someone or some system of values. I would like to remember that this book was published in 1854, before the Civil War. The situation hasn't changed, or has got worse, because many of us are slaves without realizing it. Thoreau also says, most men, even in this comparatively free country, through mere ignorance and mistake, are so occupied with the factitious cares and superfluously coerced labors of life that its finer fruits cannot be plucked by them. Yet some, not whites, go to the other side of the globe, to barbarous and unhealthy regions, and devote themselves to trade for 10 or 20 years in order that they may live, that is, keep comfortably warm, and die in New England at last. Success in glittering society of capitalism is not a real richness of life. This is what the book Warden says. What society thinks is good is not always good. That's why Chris doesn't think that getting a good education and a good job always makes people happy. So he threw away his life up till then and went on a journey. And Thoreau is famous as the person who wrote Civil Disobedience. Warden in the film is the version that includes it. To explain the idea simply, it says, don't be a slave to the law. I do exactly what society wants me to do. The idea is that this kind of lack of identity makes people unhappy. It is not unusual for it to be futile or even bad. In this case, you should obey your inner voice and resist. You may break the law and arrest it, but it is your duty as a civilian to disobey. This kind of idea is called transcendentalism. Thoreau and his friend Ralph Waldo Emerson had this idea. They think you shouldn't blindly obey society or its system. You should cherish your inner voice. Chris is very much influenced by this idea. Thus Chris threw away the life he had lived and decided to live a life as Alex the Supertramp, like a hermit that strayed from society. While hitchhiking, Chris met a couple of Jan and Rainey. They called themselves rubber tramps. They called Chris a leather tramp, meaning a tramp without a car. Chris quotes Thoreau and say, rather than love, than money, than faith, than fame, than fairness, give me truth. In search of the truth, Chris continued his journey. Eastern South Dakota, the 10th of September 1990, Chris gets the job at the grain elevator. It is around here that contradictions begin to appear in the protagonist's actions. To do the job is to get the money as compensation. But he started his penniless journey by donating all his savings and burning the money he had. There is a contradiction in doing work. When the employer and Chris are having a drink in a bar, Chris says, you know, about getting out of this sick society. He and Wayne both shout, society, society. 'Cause you know what I don't understand? I don't understand why every person is so bad to each other so often. It doesn't make sense to me. Judgment, control, all that, the whole spectrum. This is probably the line that best expresses Chris's real intention. Wayne is not a hippie like Jan or Rainey. He settles down in a place and does his job. But he understands the sense of people who have strayed from society, although he himself breaks the law and is arrested. The idea of running down the river came to Chris, and then he went to a government office to get permission. It is also strange. He decided to be free of all the rules of society and started his journey. Why is he trying to get permission? He is told that it will take years to get permission. In the end, he went down the river without permission. Then he should have done it in the first place. Later, he went to the government office to get an ID card. This is also a contradiction. He threw away his identity card at the beginning. He tries to get an ID card with the name Alexander Supertramp, even though it is a fake name. Getting an ID is the act of having his existence recognized by society. The reason he threw away his ID was to make his existence disappear from society. The fake name Alex is the act of making Chris disappear and is for convenience for the time being. He regretted throwing away his ID at the time. He fantasized the image of himself who have had a regular job. But he changed his mind and quit it to get a new ID. This episode also represents his conflict. The reason why Chris had such a value system that was so different from society was not just because he was too smart and the book he had read. His father had married another woman and he was not married to Chris's mother. He was also brought up to see his parents in constant conflict. The scene of his parents' confrontation came back to him. He read the book as if trying to forget it. The title of the book he was reading in this scene was The Call of the Wild. It is the story of a pet dog returning to nature. It represents Chris's will to leave human society. White Fang, written by the same author, Jack London, is also Chris's favorite. It is the story of a hunting dog who becomes a pet in a civilized family. The fact that the two books are shown in the same shot at the beginning of the film suggests that the story proceeds in a situation in which Chris has a contradiction. In the film, Chris worked in the hamburger shop, which appeared to be Burger King, without wearing socks, under the name Alex. This episode is a little different. Chris actually worked at McDonald's and is said to have given his real name and social security number. He wore socks while working, but is said to have taken them off as soon as he finished. This episode also expresses his conflict. While rebelling against the rule of the world, he goes out with the world. Chris met Jan and Rainey again at the slabs, where hippies met. Chris deepened his interaction with the hippies. Chris became a hermit because he was suspicious of society, but he didn't seem to stop interacting with people. There are different views as to whether Chris was a misanthropist or not. His family, schoolmates at university, and colleagues at work saw him as a character who turned inwards. Laurie Zaza, McDonald's second assistant manager, said, "He just didn't make the connection. It was like he was off in his own universe." Many people said similar things, including his sister Kareem. Chris was very unhappy with his parents. Although he was friendly with his sister Kareem, he left home without telling her. On the other hand, some people find Chris to be very gregarious. He used to sit right there at the end of the bar and tell us these amazing stories of his travels. He could talk for hours. A lot of folks here in town got pretty attached to old Alex. He had a good time when he was around people. A real good time. At the swap meet, he would talk to everybody who came by. He must have met 6,000 or 7,000 people in Ireland, and he was friendly with every one of them. He needed his solitude at times, but he wasn't a hermit. He did a lot of socializing. Sometimes I think it was like he was storing up company for the times when he knew nobody would be around. The people he befriended were Wayne from the grain elevator, the hippies, and Ronald Frant, the old man he met just before leaving for Alaska. Frant became so friendly with him that he offered to adopt him as his son. These are the people who showed some understanding of Chris's way of life. John Krakauer expresses Chris's ambivalent character as follows. McCandless's personality was puzzling in its complexity. He was intensely private but could become vivid and gregarious in the extreme. And despite his overdeveloped social conscience, he was no tight-lipped, perpetually grim do-gooder who frowned on fun. To the contrary, he enjoyed tipping a glass now and then and was an incorrigible ham. Chris McCandless seems to have been an extraordinary ambivalent character. Extraordinary asocial and at the same time extraordinary social. It seems to have something to do with his contradictory actions. He donated all his savings and burned the beers at hand. And he tried to live without society to the point of changing his name. But actually he worked and earned money later. After the grain elevator, he also worked in a hamburger shop. Although he destroyed his identity card himself, he asked for it to be reissued. Although he wanted to be free of any rules imposed by society, he tried to get permission when he wanted to go down the river in a canoe. These actions are contradictory. Why does he do such contradictory actions? The theme of the film is whether society makes a person happy or not. The protagonist thinks that the existence of society makes a person unhappy, but he can't think this way completely. That is why his contradiction appears in his actions. This is the theme of the film. There is a scene where he imagined if he had got a job ordinarily. He thought it over and stopped reissuing the ID. This kind of contradiction is emphasized in the film. According to Krakauer's book, Chris didn't try to get permission when he wanted to run down the river. The reason he tries to get permission in the film must be to emphasize his contradiction. Rather than love, than money, than faith, than fame, than fairness, give me truth. Was he planning to live in nature forever? Maybe write a book about my troubles, about getting out of this sick society. How about we talk about this when I get back from Alaska? These lines seem to mean that he wasn't planning to live in nature forever. But you don't know anything unless you do something. Chris began his survival in the wild alone. Although Chris is clever, he couldn't make the survival life work as he expected. The maggots appeared on the moose he shot, and then he couldn't eat it. He couldn't catch other game as he expected. He tried to cross the river, but failed, and came back to the bus shivering with cold. With a book of plants in his hand, Chris looked for edible plants and ate them. But one day he felt his condition was bad. He made the mistake of eating a poisonous plant. He became unable to move. It's impossible to go out and look for food. Dazed by poison and hunger, he opened his favorite book, Dr. Zhivago, and wrote the following sentence. Happiness only real when shared. This famous phrase must be the most important part of the film. It was left by Chris McCandless, According to the book by John Krakauer, Chris scribbled excited notes in the margins in the book. One of them is the following. And so it turned out that only a life similar to the life of those around us, merging with it without a ripple, is genuine life. And that unshared happiness is not happiness. And this was most vexing of all. Where the famous phrase was written was next to it. But in the film, there are no other scribbles at where the phrase was written. Krakauer's book writes that the famous phrase was written next to, and this was most vexing of all. And this sentence is probably written by McAndress. It appears that the famous phrase was written next to it. There is no other scribble in the shot in the film. The sentences before and after the merging in which the famous phrase was written doesn't have something to do with the phrase. Happiness only real when shared. This can be taken to mean that he intended to live the life of a solitary vagabond and become a member of the human community, but we will never know. This is how Krakauer describes it. By contrast, the film seems to capture this expression as the most important one. What this film has portrayed is the theme of whether society makes a person happy or not. The protagonist continued to act in a contradictory way because he was afraid about the conflict. And the conclusion that the protagonist reached was that it was important to share the happiness that he was pursuing. As he died, what appeared in his mind was the image of the people with whom he had interacted. I have had a happy life and thank the Lord. Goodbye and may God bless all. Chris McAndress finally left this world and passed away. Who saw this film must be impressed. It is because this film asks you what is to live for a person. If you want to live like yourself, you will confront society. If you try to conform to society, you will lose yourself. A person has to live in contradiction. Most people probably don't think about it. Most people probably die without thinking about it. But those who watch this film must have had an experience to be concerned about such a thing. After the hippie's journey, Chris McAndress or Alexander Supertramp comes to the conclusion that happiness should be shared. But he dies alone. Let me share a quote with you. Half for your happiness, half for the happiness of others. This is the word of Do-Shin So, the founder of the martial arts Shorinji Kempo. You should live half of your life for yourself and the other half for others. The life devoted to thinking only of oneself will be boring in the end. But a life devoted only to other people is not your life. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked this video, please subscribe and give me a thumbs up.